Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new, welcome. My name is Adelina and I make videos about living in my tiny house on wheels and living a more intentional life. Today, as you can see, I am outside the tiny house. I decided, given how much I complained about the cold weather, that I would take it outside. So I am at our local park down by the river, and I'm going to do a part 2 of the Q&A. And today I'm talking about the costs of things and sort of the timeline, how long it took to build, that sort of stuff. So if that's of interest, stay tuned and join me enjoying this beautiful, beautiful day. So the first question we have is, and it's one that I get a lot, is how big is the tiny house? Trying not to get the glare on the camera, but it is nice and sunny. So how big is the tiny house? The tiny house, serendipity, is 37 feet long from the front of the gooseneck to the back of the home where the living room is, and 9.5 feet wide. Street legal for a tiny house, for any vehicle on the highways in Canada, is 8.5 feet wide. No more than 8.5 feet wide, and no taller than 13.5 feet from the road to the highest peak. And so the tiny house, when it's on its tires, is under that height. Next, how many square feet is the tiny house? I have my notes here. Now, the tiny house inside measurements, square footage, on the main floor is just over 300 square feet. 306 based on my measurements. The loft itself is another 85 square feet for a total of 391 square feet of living space in the tiny house, including the loft. So then the next big question, and again one that I get asked all the time, is what did the tiny house cost? The total cost of the tiny house, including everything, was $147,875 in Canadian dollars. So that's a lot of money for a tiny house on wheels. Not as much as some, but you're probably asking, what did that include? Well, first of all, I should mention that the trailer for my tiny house is a custom-built trailer, built specifically for tiny houses. And the trailer itself cost me $20,600, just over $20,600. Again, everything in Canadian dollars. Gooseneck trailers are more expensive, so it cost me a bit more. I did go wider than street legal, so my house is 37 feet long and 9.5 feet wide. So that extra foot obviously meant that the trailer cost more. So the trailer itself cost me just over $20,500. So what else is included in the cost of the tiny house? So that includes the trailer. Custom cabinets. So my cabinets are custom built for the tiny house. They're not stock cabinets that you would get from a building supply place or even IKEA. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but mine are custom built. And I do have a lot of cabinets in my tiny house because I have a big kitchen. And if you've seen my tour, you know what I'm talking about. I'll link it down below. And I also have a lot of storage. I have cupboards right beside my desk for pantry and my office space, and I have a pantry. So I have a lot of cupboards. I also have a front entry closet. So that includes the cupboards. It also includes all my windows. I have 12 windows, 9 of which open, and some of them are quite large. That adds to the cost. You want good windows and good ventilation, cross ventilation in your tiny house. That includes all of the appliances. So my fridge, my stove, my washer dryer combo unit, my furnace, and my hot water tank are all included in that. And obviously my light fixtures, all of that. The house has spray foam insulation, and I went with plywood sheathing instead of OSB, which is more expensive but lighter, and obviously that makes a difference in the cost. That also includes my Lunos air exchange system, which was, if I remember correctly, almost $4,000 or just over, around $4,000. But that was really important to me because I wanted a good air exchange system to manage moisture and air quality in the tiny house. And it also includes having my IKEA bed assembled in the house. When I ordered my bed, I had it delivered directly to the tiny house, and I had them assemble it so I wouldn't have to do that. So that includes everything top to bottom for the tiny house. It does not include the skirting and does not include the front step or the shed that I built out of the gooseneck. That was all extra, but that includes everything that came with the house when it moved to the spot. What did I budget for? I budgeted $125,000 when I was initially thinking about building a tiny house. That's what I thought it would cost. But at that time, I was looking at a house that was 8.5 feet wide, and I was thinking about a house that would be 8.5 feet wide and probably about 35 feet long. So when I made the change to going wider and longer, that obviously added to the cost, not just of the trailer that was being custom built for my tiny house, but also to all of the materials to build that extra space. So all of those things made a difference. Now, I've never built anything before, but I knew just from listening to people who had built homes before that you should always sort of set aside about 10 to 15% for overages based on, things you might change and additions to the design. And I had sort of planned for that. So that cost for my house, that $147,875, to me is a very good cost. I recently saw a custom built van. Was it a Sprinter or was it a ProMaster? It doesn't matter. But it was a van that somebody had custom retrofitted to be a camper van. And that was $150,000 that they were selling it for. So I would say that for the size that I have and the quality of the build that I got, that is an excellent price and well worth it for sure. Another question that I get quite a bit from people when they've watched the tiny house tour or they're thinking about going tiny, they all want to know, how long did it take to build? So it didn't take that long to build, actually, but there's so much more than just the actual construction time factored into the timeline. So I'm going to give you the full timeline, start to finish, of my tiny house. I chose my builder based on interviewing multiple builders, and the way I actually discovered Teacup Tiny Homes in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada, was I actually went to a home and garden show here in Calgary in March of 2018. At that time, I was just beginning the process of, I'd just gotten serious about building a tiny house, and I had actually interviewed a couple of builders already at that point. I hadn't gone out to Nelson, British Columbia to visit with Nelson Tiny Homes, and but that happened actually later on that summer. Maybe this was a bad idea, filming outside, but it's just so damn nice outside. Anyways, so where was I? Yes, I had gone to the Home and Garden Show here in Calgary in March of 2018, and they had, for the first time ever, actually I think the only time ever, they had a tiny house village there inside the exhibition, and they had multiple tiny homes, one of which, E Squared, I think is the name of the company. I had already visited their showroom and seen their tiny house there, and Teacup was there, and there was another tiny house, and then a builder or a retrofitter of Airstream trailers into sort of tiny houses. So that was the first time I met Jen McCarthy, the owner at Teacup, and actually saw their build. And I was really impressed with her. I thought I just connected right away with her. I loved her energy and her philosophy, and the tiny house that was there, I think it was the Midsummer Night's Dream, really beautiful little house, and it had a main floor bedroom. It was just so efficient and so beautiful. So I got her contact information, and I called her the next week, and we set up a time for a phone call, to basically just discuss the process and get a feel for how it would go. So that happened on March 17th, that we had our conversation on the phone. We talked for a good long time. It was awesome. So on October 5th of 2018, I drove down from Calgary to Lethbridge to see her current builds. She had 2 on the go that were goosenecks. They were smaller than what I was planning on building, but it gave me a good feel for the quality of the construction for a teacup, and a better feel for her. Actually took my youngest kid with me. We did a little field trip. It was really amazing to be in one of the houses that was a gooseneck style. You know, a lot of people think that tiny houses are small, and they are. Obviously, they're called tiny houses for a reason. But what always happens, certainly happens every time somebody comes into my house, is once you get inside of a tiny house, you realize how spacious it actually feels. And I certainly had that when I saw her build. So that was in October 2018 that I did my first field trip out to Lethbridge to see what Teacup was building and sort of get a feel for the quality. At the beginning of November, I put my design deposit down, and that was $5,000 at the time. I don't know how much it is now, and I don't know what other builders do, but at the time it was $5,000 down to start the design process. So that started us doing floor plan. Now, I had obsessed about tiny houses for years. I had sort of been planning my tiny house and deciding what I wanted for several years, and I had a really good idea. So what I did was I sent Jen a couple of videos of houses that I loved, pictures of houses that I loved. I sent a lot of pictures of kitchens, and especially kitchens, that there's just something I loved about them, a feel for them. They weren't necessarily in tiny houses, but I wanted her to have a feel for my style. And I also sent her some pictures of my townhouse that was I was going to sell, so she would have a feel for my style. So that was November 2nd, 2018, that we started the process of doing the floor plans. We probably went back and forth about a month and a half. About a month and a half, back and forth with designs on floor plans until I was set on what I wanted. During that time, I realized that I wanted to go wider so I could fit the home office space along the side in the hallway down towards the bathroom and bedroom. And I also decided that I wanted to go longer so I would have a bit of a bigger living room entertaining space. Because this is my full-time home, and I wanted to be sure that it was the right size for me. We settled on that early in December, first or second week of December, and then I put my first big deposit down. It was for the trailer. We had to get the trailer ordered, and I paid for the trailer up front. That was the first big deposit that I put down. The trailer didn't take nearly as long as I expected it to. It kind of surprised me how fast they got it done. And then I had to put my next big lump sum down so they could order the lumber and stuff so they could start the construction. Now this is the way to tube the river in style. Now February 13th, I actually drove down to Lethbridge to spend a few hours with Jen, ended up being most of a day actually, to do the color selections for my tiny house, my kitchen cabinets, flooring, paint, all of those things. That was a ton of fun because it's so nice to do that in person. She gave me the option of doing it virtually, but I'm a very tactile person and I really wanted to do it in person. I'm also the kind of person that can make a decision quickly, so I knew that if I could be there, see these things in person, I could make up my mind pretty quick, and I did. Shortly after that, I put my third large deposit down. So May 17th, 2019, I took another drive out to Lethbridge. I also brought my younger kid with me, and we went to see the build partway done. It was a very emotional day because up until that point, you know, it was real, but it wasn't physically real to me. I hadn't actually seen it. felt it, touched it sort of thing, and this was my opportunity to do that. The house could have actually been done sooner. I kind of slowed the process down because I was waiting to sell my condo and I really wanted to get the funds out of that before I needed to put my next big deposit down. But I did. I sold it in May, at the end of May, and the house was done by the end of June. January to June is how long it took to build technically, but it could have been done sooner than that. I sort of set the pace for how long it would take to get built. I wanted to do a walkthrough in person. Again, she gave me the option to do that virtually, but I wanted to go down and do a walkthrough in person. We went down on June 29th to do the walkthrough, and that was magical. I think you can see from the pictures that I had the biggest smile the whole day. It was just so amazing to see the house finished. That's when Jen went through all the systems with me so that I understood how everything worked. July 8th is when she came home to Calgary. I actually drove out to Lethbridge again and I followed her home. And that's when I took the video of her coming out of the shop and going down the highway and then getting pulled into the spot. It was quite amazing. So July 8th, 2019 is when I took possession, and I have been living in Serendipity, my tiny house, for almost 2 years now, because it's just the beginning of June 2021. So that's basically the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I just wanted to go over the questions that I get asked the most when it comes to costs, timeline, things like that. It was kind of cool actually going through my calendar to sort of identify when things happened, because it seems like so long ago, even though it's only been 2 years. But I guess when I started the process, it was 2018. So it was a while ago. But I hope that answered those questions. If you have more questions, please let me know, and I will see you next week.